All right, so today we're going deep, really deep, into a film that just came out at the Berlin International Film Festival. Turn in the Wound, it's called. It's about the war, obviously, Ukraine, but it's also got this, like, other layer to it, poetry.
Yeah, it's really, it's pretty amazing how they bring art, poetry into the whole thing. You're not just watching a war documentary. You're kind of like experiencing it through this like artistic lens almost. It's about the human spirit and all that.
Okay, so, like, the film is set in Kyiv during the invasion, right? But you said it's not a typical war documentary. How so?
Well, yeah, I mean, you see the war, of course, but it's all these different voices. Like they've got Patti Smith reading these poets, right? Anton Artaud, you know him, kind of a like French playwright, but super intense, kind of dark. And then there's René Daumal. His poetry was really philosophical, mystical even. Oh, and then Rimbaud, Arthur Rimbaud, I mean. French, very symbolic, really rebellious stuff for the time.
Wow. Those are, like, heavy hitters, poetry-wise. And they chose these poets specifically. I mean, their work can be pretty intense, and the themes.
Totally. But that's kind of the point, I think. Like all that intensity, the questions they're asking about life and existence, it fits somehow,
Yes.
with what's happening in Ukraine, I mean. It adds this whole other layer of meaning to everything. The resilience and just the will to survive that you see.
And it's not all poetry, right? There are also stories for people who are actually there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The filmmakers talk to people who are fighting, civilians, just everyday people caught in the middle of it, and they tell their stories. Like, there's this one guy, a musician, he used his music to keep the soldiers' spirits up, even while the bombs were falling around them.
Wow.
It's amazing, right? Creating beauty in the middle of all that chaos. There's another scene with this woman. She lost her home, but she was still, like, helping other people, giving them food and shelter. It's pretty powerful stuff.
It really sounds like it.
Yeah.
And I heard they even got President Zelenskyy in the film.
Yeah, they did. And it's not, some formal interview or anything. It's just Zelenskyy right there in the middle of everything, talking to the Ukrainian people, rallying them to fight.
Wow. What's he like in the film?
Well, there's this one part he says something like, "We are not afraid, we will not back down." Stuff like that. You can just like hear it in his voice,
Yeah.
The emotion, the determination. It's really impactful.
So you've got all these elements, right? The poetry, the personal stories, and then Zelenskyy leading during this crazy time. It's fascinating how they use those poets, though, like their words against the backdrop of war. What do you think they were going for that?
I think it shows how art can be like two things at once, especially during a war. On the one hand, it can be this form of resistance, right? Like a way to fight back, to like lift people's spirits, but then it's also a refuge, a way to find peace and hope when everything's falling apart. And the film, I think it shows both sides of that.
Yeah. It really makes you think, like, how can something as beautiful as poetry exist at the same time as something as awful as war? It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah, exactly. And that tension, that contrast, that's what makes the film so interesting, I think. It makes you think about the human experience,
Yeah.
how we can be capable of such beauty, but also such terrible things.
Right. I also read that visually, the film is really stunning. Like how they capture the beauty of Kyiv, even with all the destruction.
Oh, the cinematography is incredible. There's this one shot, it's like the camera's moving over the city at dawn and you see the light, this golden light hitting the buildings. And some of them are like damaged, and there's smoke rising. It's really sad, of course, but there's also this feeling of like hope, like breaking through all the darkness. And the music, the score, it's so haunting, so beautiful. It just adds to the whole emotional impact.
So for someone watching this film, what do you think is the main takeaway? What do you hope people walk away with?
I think it reminds us that even when things are really, really bad, the human spirit is pretty amazing. People find ways to keep going, to be creative, to have hope. And art, it can be a way to like transcend the bad stuff and connect with each other on a human level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really inspiring how art can be such a powerful force, even in the face of something like war. It makes you appreciate the role of art in a whole new way. So before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. How do you think art can help us understand and cope with events like war? Can it really bridge divides and make us more empathetic? If you're interested in exploring these questions, I highly recommend checking out Turn in the Wound. It's a powerful film. I think it'll stick with you long after you've seen it.